From breakthrough devices to the bottom line, we explore the investment trends, the commercial models, and the strategic thinking required to bring neurotechnology to the global market. This is the Business of Neurotech. Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Adam Fraser, and I'm delighted today to welcome Naveen Rao, curator of Neurotech Futures, Forbes contributor, one of the sharpest sense makers in the sector. Over the last 2 decades, he's worked at the intersection of healthcare, tech, and strategy, and he's become the go-to analyst for where neurotech is flowing and what the numbers really say. Naveen, very big welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Adam. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Based on that intro, a podcast called The Business of Neurotech, I think I've got the right guy. We shall dive into your backstory, Naveen. We'll talk about you do a lot of work, obviously, via your Substack and your newsletter, in particular the 2025 deep dive. And then we'll ask you to put the wet towel on the head, look into the future, and explore what's coming. So, look, great to have you on board. Interesting background, how you sort of meandered into where you arrived today. So, yeah, tell us about your career to date, your backstory, and what you're currently doing in the media landscape.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks again for the opportunity to share some thoughts and reflect with you, something I wish I probably should be doing more of. But yeah, I think meandering is the perfect word to describe my career. There's some chart, like this is what success is supposed to look like. And then the reality is, the big squiggle. So I am the big squiggle. I started off, I was pre-med. I thought I was going to be a doctor like my father. I wound up going into public health school. And then I think a lot of my career and the sort of directions that led me here are more about timing and decision-making. It's been more reacting to the environment around me. And maybe that's true for others as well. But I wound up moving to DC a few months before President Obama got elected in 2008. And my career took a very specific direction based on all the things that happened in the first and second year of his administration related to health policy from the federal level that directly shapes and in some cases creates markets for health innovation. So I was doing some work in managed care, kind of moonlighting into the health IT policy circuit in DC. So that was very formative for me just to learn about what's happening, what are the numbers, what are the timelines, what are the kind of implications for playing ball and for not playing ball, and how to translate that effectively to leadership and kind of executive audiences. So it was great, right place, right time. I think the second formative moment that really set me on a specific path that leads straight into neurotech is I spent a few years in advocacy after that first chapter, and I worked at a group called the Livestrong Foundation, which you might remember from the yellow wristbands. And Lance Armstrong, you can say what you want about him, but he was a visionary for creating the field of cancer survivorship. I wouldn't say creating it, but bringing it into reality, manifesting it, and throwing resources into it, and really spreading awareness. So my job there was to be kind of a policy analyst for tech for cancer survivors and how to work with the communities through the foundation. I brought this, this DC energy. I was like, oh, let me, do an analysis and give you a slide and a timeline. And my boss, in her wisdom, she told me to just sort of slow my roll and just listen to patients and get on a few groups of people who survived cancer, were caregivers for people experiencing cancer, getting treated for it, surviving it. People who didn't survive it, their family kind of weighed in on what should tech be doing. And that's where I got the real talk. And I think for me, it's really about this, and I'm open about this. It's not a very good strategy, but I call my work a Trojan horse. From the outside, it looks like, B2B innovation. We're sizing markets. We're talking about investment opportunities. We're facilitating and catalyzing innovation in this very specific business kind of structure. But inside, it's all like, I got children. I call it like, it's a Trojan horse, but it's like feeding vegetables to your kid, through any means necessary. And it's making sure that the work represents companies and founders who are really trying to do things to improve really specific parts of people's lives. So that was a real big kind of aha moment for me. And then I guess rounding third base, I worked at an analyst firm as a freelancer for a few years. And the aha moment I had was like end of 2015, just about 10 years ago. I said, if I'm going to be doing this full time, but not have a full-time job, why would I work for someone else? I got to figure out how to do this on my own. In March of 2016, I founded my company, Patchwise Labs, which has been sort of I think you have a question about this, but kind of it's a single member LLC. It's really the structure for me to explore projects and opportunities as a basically full-time writer and analyst.
So Neurotech Futures is kind of part of Patchwise Labs. That's one of the,
yes.
That's your media property.
Yeah. The way I think about it is whatever the statistic is, like only 1 out of 10 startups make it, or something like that. 90% of startups fail.
Yeah.
So in the 10 years I've run this company, I've had 5 different kind of iterations of this idea of how to scale my impact as a writer. And of course, there's some consulting to pay the bills, but it's been about exploring really 2 facets of the work. One is the content strategy. People don't really read big, long reports. And that was true, 10, 12 years ago. It's much more true now. Um, so how to think about experimenting with the form and reaching people and educating people and putting facts together that doesn't seem like, boring homework assignment. That's not going to happen. But thinking about multimedia, digital opportunities were coming out at the time, different web tools. I think I've arrived at the newsletter as really a happy medium on the craft side of how to reach a lot of people, owning the channel, owning the sort of narrative structure and format. And it's a big experiment, right? I think now it's a lot of people. I'm not the only full-time writer. Substack is full of them. On the flip side, though, and more importantly, I think to Neurotech, it's picking the right field. You can make a living covering healthcare from any angle, like revenue cycle management. It's like, what are we doing here? So again, that advocacy element really led me through, and what are the areas that, as an analyst, I have a unique opportunity to kind of legitimize and validate and help bring attention to stuff that's not quite there yet, that no other analyst firm is covering. So get out ahead of the curve and really think about pulling people forward. And I've been trying to do that in different areas like digital health, digital therapeutics. Cancer is another example of that. And then I arrived at Neurotech really on the other side of the pandemic, which we don't have to talk about, but it's like it's very recent. It's really the last 3 years of my career. I started Neurotech like late 2022, and I really didn't know much. I'd read that big Wait But Why about Neuralink, like from earlier, and I had some awareness that this was going on. But it was Nita Farhani's book that really opened my eyes to this as a market, and it really checked off all the boxes for me, including stuff that I sort of had some pivots over the pandemic, really exploring alternatives to working in healthcare for different reasons. And yeah, I was writing fiction actually for close to 2 years full time, almost full time. And in Neurotech, I found this really amazing opportunity to kind of pull that analyst skill set and that kind of advocacy driven mission to bring and catalyze markets with a field that's basically like sci-fi adjacent. Arguably, also it's if we're talking about like, oh yeah, what's the 5-year outlook for PCIs? Like, there's this new podcast that just came out with Max Hodak and Benet from Protocol Labs. I mean, it's like this is sort of engineering reality. This is imagineering. It's speculative. It's wonderful. I think I'm really well suited to it, and I'm just excited to be writing more in the next few years and try to put it all together. But yeah, that's the secret plan for me. It's just experimenting with different opportunities. It's really right place, right time. As a sidebar, I'll turn it back to you. Like, I'm such a big fan of what you're doing at Omniscient, and I know that's not the focus of this podcast, but just one of many examples of companies that it wasn't possible to do your work 10 years ago. 10 years from now, it's like we have no idea what it could look like, and that's so exciting, right? And in healthcare, it was feeling a little rare, so I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much. And look, we'll get into unpacking the neurotech landscape today shortly, because you are the guy for that space, particularly from a capital markets and a funding point of view. But yeah, no, the sci-fi reference is funny. I think, this is podcast number 5. Already had a couple of sci-fi references. We've overtaken Star Trek many years ago already, and BCI in particular is absolutely a kind of glimpse into a partly robotic future. So it's a fascinating sector to be part of, and yet still so many mental health and neurological disorders, to attempt to fix. So there's a confluence of many things happening with Neurotech. Before we get into the sector, just as one quick aside, thank you for introducing me to Substack. I had missed that boat. It feels like I've gone back to the early onset of blogging and Medium, the platform, and sort of long-form writing. It's some hybrid of newsletters and blogging, and very interesting. But yeah, they've unearthed a whole mini community in there.
It's really wonderful. I'm not even really fully steeped in it. I just try to hit my publishing timelines and schedules, but it is absolutely an ecosystem. And the fact that I can do this full time is shout out to Substack. Like, I wrote on Medium, and for writers, it's not that great. I don't know how much has changed. For readers, it's a beautiful experience. But really, the ownership of the publication, the business side of things, I think BHAB also does a great job. But it's been wonderful and really enabling.
Yep.
And I would encourage. There are so many great neurotech Substacks. I link to as many of them as I can. Maybe this is a good action item for me, just like a meta of all my favorite Substacks. There's so many of them that are covering neuro.
No, so thank you for that. So let's get into it. I want to deep dive on your 2025 market summary, but before we go into that, all guests have had a slightly different definition. But when you hear the term neurotech, maybe you hear neuroscience economy, maybe you hear brain data economy. How do you wrap your arms around where this sector starts and stops? How do you define it?
That's a great question. I think I'm personally very open-minded about it. Like, I think caffeine is neurotech. I'm one of those. It's about like inducing effect, like a target size. Could be molecules, could be electricity, be magnets, lights, sound, multiple.
So psychedelics very much in.
Yeah. It's like, kind of authoring your own experience. I journal a lot. And I journal my way into neurotech. Like, literally, we won't bore all your reader or your listeners, but I think writing to me is neurotech. It's neurofeedback. Prove me wrong. You can't. I'm very open-minded, but I think for the newsletter, it's the opposite end of that. It's very structured. It's venture-backable companies largely. Consumers a little bit different. If you go DTC or whatever, and then it's like really thinking about the numerator denominator populations. Who are we talking about? What's the kind of product market fit? So it's a more traditional business lens that informs my sort of filter, I guess. And I don't really talk about drugs outside of the capacity of like enabling discovery, biomarker discovery, partnered platforms, the stuff that like Beacon's doing, really selling into the CRO stack, essentially, and recreating what's possible to both measure and then not deliver, like with focused ultrasound. There's some really interesting stuff happening with life sciences. So absolutely, it's a market, but it's a market for next-gen tools, essentially. Right.
And we'll go into the 2025 capital report next question, but you obviously write about, you're a writer, you're an analyst on a range of topics, from funding to strategic alliances to M&A to even senior leadership moving around. I mean, a penny for your workflow. How are you staying on top of just the vast tsunami of news in the sector?
Honestly, pass. Like, I feel like I'm not, and I think that's the early part of like starting this work 10 years ago is just like realizing how haplessly like outmatched I was. And just like, even if I cover a margin of it, it's like, it's better than nothing. So that's, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's really just about effort over time. But I use LinkedIn a lot. That's kind of my primary source of just what's going on. There's a lot of stuff I probably should be doing more of with, automating now. And I've started to experiment with, I use like the Perplexity to fiddle around with different kind of automations and stuff. And that's okay. I think the part that's hardest, but not really. It's like, it's taste. It's like, I have a filter and I started that a few years ago. So now it's easy for me to like, just know. I don't have to think about it. I have my own little AI inside my brain now. But I think I'm working with some interns to help me sort of automate and streamline and really expand the reach, because if it's just one guy from LinkedIn, I mean, it's not that compelling. So I'm really thinking about, there are standard sources too, like there are press release indexes you can search, company pages, obviously. And social media feeds are not what they used to be. I think that was a primary source like 8 years ago. And then now, like, I don't spend much time on all the different channels. Probably should be doing more for my job, but it's good enough is good enough. And I think the important part for me, at least with the notables, has been it's much more important to just keep on shipping, not to get it right and be like, oh, I missed 3 key stories. Like, pick it up next time. Nobody cares. This is not a report. It's an imperfect sort of art and science of just trying to keep up with the Joneses. There's so much going on.
And it is vast. I mean, having just browsed your latest notables, it's long. And that's like one fortnight's worth of news. So it's probably an unwinnable task to try and cover everything, but you're doing an amazing job of getting the vast bulk of the headlines in Neurotech.
I think ultimately there's a shorter form in the future. It's an evolution towards simplicity, but for now it's really kind of sprawling. And I'm sorry, and you're welcome.
So look, on the report, and again, kudos, you have become kind of the go-to reference point for how much money is raised in Neurotech, and how much of that was BCI, and done a great job. So your 2025 capital market summary or funding summary, you talked about $4.8 billion was raised across 140 deals in the sector. I've got a couple of things I want to unpack, but what were the main headlines you talk about took away from calendar 2025 as a whole?
Yeah, and I do this in the snap. Thank you for all the kind words. And the snapshots opens with all the caveats of like this is imperfect and everything I just shared with you. So I think a few things. Like one, this is at best a lagging indicator, and in the site there's like a second part of it that came out, and so there actually was over 5 billion because I missed a bunch of stuff. That was actually really big news. It's like, well, again, doing the best I can. So this is just I think it represents probably a majority, but definitely not a totality of everything that happened last year. So that's one. And yeah, it was a big growth. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's in there like compared to 2024, which is the first year I kind of did a full year of coverage. Everything was basically up. A couple of categories, as I recall, that were not. But generally, it's rapidly growing. And yeah, I've not fully like dove into, I guess, all the little analysis, like thinking about all the regulatory stuff that happened, how it connects with the funding. Like that's an ongoing project, an opportunity now. And again, going back to AI, I mean, it's part of what's going to be coming out hopefully more this year in terms of like the analytic output. But yeah, I think what really impressed me is in there. I think like the BCI story is one I personally just can't take my eyes away from. I mean, it's fascinating to me how quickly this field is evolving and moving forward. I think it's really exciting. I think focused ultrasound is an area that I didn't even know existed, until I started hearing about it. I think Insight Tech a couple years ago. And just through that network and Focused Ultrasound Foundation and all the things that they've kind of put together in a great newsletter, you should sign up for theirs. It's just like, oh my gosh, like we're kind of inventing new treatments, inventing new ways to put drugs into people's bodies and brains. And it's just, I have a friend actually, this is a little sidebar anecdote, a high school friend. He served in the military. He came back, got his PhD in like conservation ecology or something. He was like doing bat projects. And then, yeah, like I met up with him after like 18 years. I hadn't seen him. And then I noticed he had a tremor in his hand. And we never talked about it, but we had a bunch of beers though. And then he moved out of town and I was checking in with him. And he's like, yeah, I'm actually getting brain surgery. And I was like, it's a focused ultrasound. He's like, how the hell do you know that? Yeah, I call it alien space magic. I'm like, there you go. This is really helping people in ways that are immediate and I think will become really widespread. So to me, it's like, this is just fascinating to see the investments happening in that field. Anyway, I'll kind of bring it back to you.
No,
I think there's a lot of other stuff. Obviously, I'm geeked out to talk about. Keep me on track.
We'll jump into some of those, but yeah, neuromodulation between TMS and focused ultrasound and a range of other things, very interesting. But let's talk about BCI because, and again, whether the number is exact is less the point than the trend is very clear. Almost half of the funding, 45% on V1 of your report, came into BCI. So almost half the funding into a sector with, even by medtech and neurotech standards, very long timelines. They're the absolute, as mind-blowingly brilliant as BCI is and the vision is, you're literally talking about dozens of people, let alone hundreds or thousands or millions and billions that need to scale to justify the vals. So what's driving this capital flow? Is Neuralink and the Elon Musk effect a big part of it? Or is it just, this is ultimately where it kind of is where the whole neurotech thing comes together? It's a chip in your brain that reads and writes and, modulates various aspects of your brain.
Yeah. My understanding of it, I think, is that like literally and figuratively, Elon Musk, reason number one, last year, he was like, whatever Neuralink's around was, 650 or something. I mean, that was the majority slice of the pie. So that's the answer. And then figuratively, him putting this and him being who he is. Not going to talk about Elon on this podcast, but all that aside, like, yeah, the impact he's had single-handedly on putting this on the map of, I think, first and foremost, like people who like to make money. It's like, great, that's going to help everybody. And then the way that he probably could be doing it in many different ways, given just like, his stature, but the fact that he's gone through the regulated pathway and said, this is a medical device and we're not going to like, just jump steps. That's also been, to his credit and to the credit of the team at Neuralink, like, despite what he's been tweeting about really sometimes, yeah, they've been leaders in every way. And it's, really hats off to them for really creating the opportunity for so many other people. That's the first thing. I think, yeah, the rest of it really comes down to like this company's strategy. I feel like the idea of like vertical integration usually shouldn't be part of early stage medtech, right? Like fully owning everything. But in neurotech, like you it's a strategic advantage for many reasons, like internationally, geopolitically, state by state, like funding, policy making. I mean, it's like it's a full stack advantage, but it's very expensive. So it's like just like the capital required to fund these companies and bring them into existence, just so they can like try at the human stage. It's intense, right? So that's one. I guess that's two after Elon. And then another thing for me, and I'll kind of end it here, but happy to kind of brainstorm more of why this might be. It really is like, think of it like this. It's like, the iPhone. If we didn't know what the iPhone could do when we were raising capital for private startups, and you're like, why are these, why are they raising so much money for a phone? It's like, that's not what this is. Like, it says phone in the name, but it's not a phone. It's like, what's up with this med tech that goes in your brain? It's like, this is not med tech. It's not a phone. And that's the reason why people are excited about it and dumping, billions and billions, and will continue to do so, I think, for the foreseeable future. It really is kind of a longer term bet on, the early winners who are going to get in here and build, starting with the clinical market, absolutely. But we don't have to talk about like, consumer BCI, but like the end game is absolutely kind of what else is possible with this technology. And I think that's really exciting, and it's important to do it the right way, with starting in the right order. And that's what's happening today. So I'm really kind of bullish on it and excited and cautiously optimistic, let's say.
Yeah. I mean, I guess as you were saying that, I was thinking, Naveen, you start with the problems of the brain, which is where BCI's initial focus is. But as Amy Cruz talks about human flourishing, then there's the potential of the brain. So put your VC hat on. The TAM here is 8 billion people long term. And maybe that's what's justifying some of these quite, I was about to say insane, but very generous valuations in terms of what the market is willing to price today for something that, as again, brilliant as the vision is very early in its journey in terms of FDA clearances and proving the outcomes that we all hope for. Mm-hmm. It's in some ways, you think of DBS, deep brain stimulation, you put a chip in the brain for one specific purpose, or neuromodulation, you stimulate a particular part of the brain for a purpose. Open loop to closed loop, it's almost an evolutionary progress point. The BCI feels like the culmination of where this all ends. If BCI is right, it can kind of subsume a lot of other, I guess, point solutions that are currently in neurotech, and maybe that's what the market is seeing. This is kind of the ultimate platform play is BCI. It's a chip in your brain that long term can do many, many things.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, my background before this was writing speculative fiction. It's not really like that far from reality, because like, I remember I asked, I can say this now, this is a couple years ago, this is like a Forbes piece I was writing, and I talked to Kurt from Synchron, and it was my first time meeting him. I was like, all right, I'm going to ask, I'm going to like do my homework, like get all the questions, like review the data, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, I'm like, all right, all these questions for Synchron, like one for me. So I asked him, I was like, all right, Kurt, like what is a half-baked neurotech idea? And that didn't make it published, but he told me, he's like, dude, they're all half-baked. Like we're talking, you know what we're talking about here? I was like, yes. I mean, exactly. Like we're already at the edge of the map, and that's kind of the point. But to do it in the way they've done it, also hats off to Synchron. I mean, they've been another leader, in the sort of counterbalance in some ways to Synchron's kind of putting this on the map for a lot of people. They've done a tremendous service to the whole field, and I'm very excited that they've been able to just methodically, push the ball up the hill on all the important topics. So great leadership and really big into their work.
Yeah, no, look, kudos to the sector as a whole. Like I say, amazing work being done. And even since your report was done, I'm losing track of the $100 million plus new BCI rounds that are coming. So just a lot of capital coming into BCI. But let's shift gears. Tempted as ours to talk just BCI, which I'm sure in a future episode I'll do an even deeper dive into BCI. I mean, just touch on a couple of other, digital health, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. You mentioned focused ultrasound, cognitive assessments. There's a lot else going on. Any other sort of trends you want to highlight from the 2025 and I guess the start of 2026 fundraising environment for Neurotech?
Yeah, I think here's a couple of things that I'm keen on and have been kind of interested in talking with people and learning about. basically like when a company is following on another company's work, but using a different modality. To me, that's really exciting. And I'll give you a specific example. So SetPoint, they are now FDA cleared, I believe, and approved for, yeah. And they're an example of like a traditional medical device company. It's like a case study. And they've done a great job, again, like great leadership, and they've been very methodical, pursuing implanted vagus nerve stimulation for rheumatoid arthritis, which if you listen to Murthy sort of tell the story, it's just like the market opportunity against the side effects of pharma treatments. Just to name one specific thing that adds so much value, if you take that away, you add, it's like, great, there's a very clear business case here. I'm very excited for them to have gone all the way, and now they're kind of preparing to enter market. And then kind of the fast follow is this company that they got their FDA breakthrough, I believe, earlier this year, called SURF. And they're using focused ultrasound, and they wouldn't call themselves a vagus nerve stimulation company, but they're going after the same. If you look at the clinical trials, it's like different kind of endpoints, but it's very similar with what they're chasing. And that probably wasn't possible 2 years ago. Like, to me, this is like fascinating, right? They're kind of announced a little bit of a raise this year, I guess in Q1, and they're preparing for a very critical part of their clinical journey, which they may not make it out of, right? It's like, this is experimental, but you can't compare those two companies based on what they've done so far, but you can compare them based on what they're trying to do. And that to me is like, there's probably a half a dozen other examples, but just to kind of bring that to life for you is like, that's really interesting to me. I think another thing that really needs to be talked about is the consumer, quote unquote, consumer neurotech. It's been a revolution like for 20 years, so we can't use that word, but unless we mean it's going around in circles, which it is, right? It's iterating. It's starting to really cross into the mainstream, right? Like as phones become better, like you can have like a voice to text, wearable around your ear, or you could talk to your phone. And I'm again going back to your very first question. Like, to me, my phone is a BCI. Like, I don't care to disagree. Like it is to me. It's just very manual and sort of like lagging experientially, but it's absolutely maybe unintentionally designed as a BCI, right? With fine print that nobody really read at the time, and now we're all like glued to our phones. So yeah, like the optimization of that, I think is very exciting in smaller forms. And anyway, so
that's an interesting. Just jump in, Naveen. Not on the planned topic list, but I think it is a topic I'm kind of fascinated about at the moment. Is that line between a consumer wearable / wellness device, brackets completely unregulated, and people like Omniscient and the rest of us doing the FDA slog and clearing medical devices. You look at Whoop, I hope I got the pronunciation right, or Whoop just raised at 10 billion with some very notable investors. And they're starting to bump up against what is a wellness indicator, where do they cross into medical device? I feel like the next 12, 24 months, there'll be some test cases where the FDA have to jump in. And where do you see the line between those two sectors?
It's a good question. I think it's fascinating. I've included kind of Whoop and Aura in some of the analysis I published. And if for no other reason, just like to keep investors on their toes, like look at these valuations. So if you think something's ridiculous, that's in your inbox, like just look around, like triangulate, please. We live in unprecedented times. So that's part of it. But also, like the goals of these companies are very similar to the stated goals of some of these neurotech plays, which are earlier. And I think the question of like reaching critical mass and the end required to prove that this, not just to prove that it's like, this has an effect size, but in some cases, like with the kind of AI-driven components, like just to make this work properly. I think the case study here that I've written a little bit about, but it's Meta's wristband, I guess, a Control Labs wristband. The only reason that could kind of come into reality is because Meta has the resources to kind of reach as many people as possible just to train it so that when you wear it, it still works for you because enough other people have tried it and they can kind of crunch all the data to make that possible. Most neurotech companies won't do that. And as just a soapbox, and I think a cautionary note for any consumer neurotech, or any company that's claiming they have the largest neural data set, like, please don't insult your audience. Just shut up. Use different language. You're welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. No, interesting trend. Again, makes your job even harder than it would be if you only focused on FDA cleared. You've now got this whole consumer wearables wellness. Is Calm the meditation app in your ecosystem? Arguably, yes. But let's, Naveen, one final question on the 2025 kind of state of the nation. The indication mix, and again, this is where whether it's accurate to 2 decimal places really doesn't matter. The trend,
Right.
it's a big enough sample size to kind of see some trends emerging. So by indication, the top 5 were pain, motor, epilepsy, consumer, as we just talked about, and life sciences. And the thing that stood out to me, that depression came in 6th. So if you'd done a quiz with me before I'd read the report, I probably would have put depression certainly in the top 5, even if I would have possibly predicted number 1. But yet, based on these numbers, it's coming in 6th. Did you have any observations on that? Because that did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a reason it's not called like the market report. It's because that's really just I don't want to say lagging indicator, but the reason depression is so low is because the devices that are being trialed to treat depression are non-invasive generally, like a couple of psychiatric PCIs for sure. And there's some DBS plays that are not really venture backed. I mean, there's probably some stuff out there, but yeah, it's just a smaller presence in neurotech. Certainly not a smaller market opportunity, I think, both in terms of like magnitude of the problem and timeline to treat. And yeah, I think some of those companies, like the ones that are treating, depression, like Flow's headset, for example, it's hard to pin down what company category they belong to. Is it consumer? Is it medical device? To your point, so the lines are blurring, and I think that's the other caveat that you didn't ask for, but I'll put in here that there are companies that check off multiple boxes, right? So it's
Sure.
an imprecise kind of capture. But just, yeah, it's sort of to sort of put up on the wall that like, hey, here's generally how the money's flowing into groups of people who need help, essentially.
Sure. Okay. Look, Naveen, I want to be respectful of your time. Let's just shift gears for the final few questions. And like I say, look into the crystal ball. Where is the market heading? Let's talk AI because it's infused into everything unavoidably now. But I just set the scene, go one level above Neurotech. So I was looking at the top capital raises of 2026, validated across 2 different AI tools. They were almost the same. But OpenAI has just raised 120 plus billion, post money over 800 billion. Anthropic's raised 30 billion, XAI 20 billion, Waymo 16, Databricks 7, Polymarket 2.6. I'll stop there. But if you think of VC, venture capital as a whole, or just private capital as a whole, a ginormous portion is now being sucked into the large language model, the larger AI platform plays. Do you think inevitably that has some adverse ripple down effect in terms of neurotech? Imagine the number of 10, 20, $30 million Series A, Bs, and Cs that could be done within any one of those mega capital raises for the big AI players.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think like I've come around to not kind of bemoaning the state of AI funding. I think I was a little, it's jarring, right? But then like after the 5th mega raise, it's, oh, wait a minute, this is the new normal.
Come on, Naveen, get on the bandwagon. Come on.
I know. But yeah, I think it's just classic. Like, listen, I'm an analyst. Like, there's this thing called the Gartner hype cycle. This is that. Okay. So like the winners are surging to raise more money because it's a unique time where they can do so. They're playing the game they're playing. That's cool. I think the overall boost is also coming from just like, this is a generational technology, not to dismiss it. But I think the companies that are building solid devices with really specific markets, yes, where the market's in a strange time, but 18 months from now, it'll look a little different. 3 years from now, it'll look a little different, right? So if you're a company that is committed to, let's say, an FDA pathway of like 5 to 7 years, like just keep on going. Somebody's going to fund you if you are, if you prove it, if you earn it. I think for general, like we need more ideas coming in. Like I don't think VC is going to fill that gap. We don't have to talk about all the travesties to public, grant funds and support for early stage research and kind of exploratory research and translational research at the federal level. But that's certainly not a good thing. There are some other trends to fill that gap with monies from nonprofits and new funding structures, focused research organizations, things like that. But yeah, I think in general, like right now, the AI thing is just unique. It's kind of generational, it feels like. As far as the BCI kind of implications, I think that there's a big, and really not even BCI, but like there's this new buzzword, neuro AI, right? Again, I've come full circle. I think it was a little cynical like 6 months ago. I was trying to like learn and ask questions at conferences and stuff, and I got a bunch of different views. But now my real kind of understanding of it, at least so far, is that the modern generation of AI is essentially based on an understanding of neuroscience from the 1950s, which is like neural networks, what that meant then. And I'm not a technical sort of expert, right? But you can find plenty of that on the internet, or you can just ask an AI now. But it's generally like, this is the result of kind of investments and kind of crossover with neuroscience methods like a long time ago. If we think about the things that AI can't really do well today, in terms of like being off the internet, like it's a chat based, it's largely chat based, it's largely like software driven, like that's great, or maybe not great, I don't know. But beyond that, how is it going to help people in their lives? How is it going to live on devices? How is it going to be mobile? How is it going to be powered in ways that don't require like you have to be plugged into the grid? That's destroying communities across the country. Like these are all things that are probably going to eventually, hopefully soon, be discovered by people in charge. And then the sort of, again, going back to sci-fi, what we can do with this little blob of jelly with like such a minuscule amount of relative power, that's the upside.
Sure.
And companies are getting funded today on big levels that I can't talk about out loud actually, that are really pursuing this as a strategic priority. It's like we're building better AI by using neuroscience methods, and some of them are doing it without even people involved. It's like straight up neural organoids and neurons in a dish, training kind of quick kind of efficiency methods and selling that to companies. So there's a whole industry spawning, literally and
Sure.
figuratively, I guess,
Sure.
around this. And I think that's right. Eventually it's going to cross over. But to kind of come full circle to your question, it is weird, right? Like these valuations are ridiculous. So they seem, and it is what it is. I think for neuro, like keep on building, play the long game.
Yep.
Figure out who you're going to help with this technology, and just keep on going, and somebody hopefully will find you.
I mean, as your numbers show, let's go down into the neurotech sector underneath the sort of macro AI umbrella. Yes, call it circa 5 billion raised in 2025, growing in 26. I think by 2034, 50 billion is a number. We all know it's a big number in the near-term future. Do you, clearly I work in the sector, big believer in the sector, passionate about the deeper mission, purpose, values that working neurotech involves. Amy Cruz, previous podcast guest, Satura Neuro is clearly a specialist fund. If you look again, back to BCI, ring the bell, Arch and Khosla, the big generalists are also participating. Do you see over the coming 5-10 years, neurotech truly becoming its own standalone class, and a number of VC specialist funds raised purely to invest in neurotech?
I hope so. I think it's more important than some other sectors, but I won't get on the soapbox. But it deserves at least like an equal shake to like, robotics. Like, can robotics really support that many vendors? Like, it's so expensive to build. Like, maybe that money should be coming into helping people who have depression or arthritis or both, or many other things. And I think like just to kind of answer your question with another observation from the snapshot. And really, one of the exciting things that I get to work on now is like broadening the aperture for my audience. So it's like, okay, neurotech is, it's CNS, it's neurological disorders. Like, oh, focus ultrasound, that's not Earth. It's like, okay, I don't care. What I see is companies treating cancer, companies treating depression, like inflammation. This is longevity play. This is primary care. This is dementia. This is cognitive health. This is children's health. This is ADHD. This is everything. This is life. I've worked in healthcare for 19 years. And I've been in every single corner, like digital health, digital therapeutics, musculoskeletal health, social determinants of health, food insecurity, rideshare. Like, it's really a lens on what it means to be human to me. And if more investors see it that way, and that's really what my job is, like, spoiler alert, I'm trying to bring more capital into the space and try to show people that there are bets that couldn't have been made 2 years ago. But that, without sufficient capital, it will not be made in the right way, or will be made and kind of miss the target because they're not sufficiently capitalized. We can't afford that, it's a very important thing for companies that are going after things that are novel continue to get sufficient support from investors. And
Sure.
what I'm really excited about, just to come back to BCI, is that's starting to happen. If BCI was strictly okay, well, the market is not there, there's no reimbursement. It's like, listen, don't invest. Just move out of the way. You're taking up space. Companies that see what this kind of iteration of BCI is trying to do, and then where it's going to be headed in 10 years, those are the people, that's the capital we need. I'm really excited by global trends. You're seeing sovereign wealth funds pump millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars into BCI companies, as well as companies like Aura. Not a coincidence. These are generational bets. And every market has a few winners. It's about timing. So I think the reason BCI companies are well capitalized today is there's a handful of people who get it. And you mentioned some big names. They're not terrible investors.
No.
So there's some wisdom in the crowd, and I think there's a lot of good things happening that are creating momentum. I just want it to be distributed in new directions. New indications, new applications, new crossover. And yeah, we're mostly talking about the treatment therapeutic side. I think on the imaging side, from the neuro AI sort of umbrella, just multimodal recording, the possibilities of biomarker discovery, of helping people. It's so much stuff is captured on our phone, which we don't actually have access to as consumers. I think I see a world of new opportunities, really cracking that open in ways that are still emerging, and creating a huge kind of wealth of opportunities for a lot of new kinds of businesses.
Yep. I think if you believe in efficient market hypothesis, or even that the market is largely efficient and wisdom of the crowds, as you say, follow the money. And Silicon Valley and sovereign wealth, a lot of big bets are being made on BCI, which implicitly is a vote of, I guess, confidence in the neurotech sector, the potential of neurotech more broadly. Final question then, Naveen, which is related to whether we're going to see specialist VC funds like Amy's emerging over the next 5-10 years. Do you feel like, a blockbuster IPO, we're about to see SpaceX, we're probably going to see OpenAI and Anthropic. Do we need, and again, ring the bell, we're talking BCI again, could it be Neuralink? But would a blockbuster IPO really help investors see, hey, despite the long-term nature of the bet I'm making, there is going to be a liquidity exit event potential, as evidenced by, the blockbuster kind of sets the scene, then we get a ripple down of other smaller IPOs following in its wake. Do you think that's an important, I guess, milestone in the near term?
Yeah, it's absolutely an important milestone. I would say, and this is my background, my bias, right? It's necessary but not sufficient. I wrote about this in a recent thing, but NeuroPace is a good example. They IPO'd in 2021. Hooray, great. And last year, for the first time, I think 25, they crossed 100 million in revenue, which is great. That's tremendous. But they spent $100 million to make $100 million. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? I think it totally depends. If Neuralink IPOs, I'm sure it's going to be a good thing, short term. If the stock crashes, maybe not. If something goes wrong with one implant and the stock comes down, or something, it doesn't even it won't even take that. Anything can go wrong. Look at the world, right? There's a number of reasons that company stocks can plunge, unrelated to anything valid. Arguably, that's the world we live in, right? So an IPO is fine, and it's not that exciting to me. I think I'm much more interested in just and this is, I think, I've become a full neurotech insider. I think from the outside, I was looking at this really exciting emerging industry. Now I'm in conversations that are just really just wild, really beyond my imagination, and I've got a pretty big imagination. So I think we're really at the beginning, and an IPO is great. I think it's confidence for more LP kind of confidence in this space. Sorry, there's an importance of short-term market success, particularly in BCI. But I think even if it doesn't happen, or if it happens and it's sort of underwhelming, this field is not going to go away. It's not going to crash and burn, is my hope.
Yep.
But
all part of the journey for Neurotech. Look, Naveen, thank you so much for joining the Business of Neurotech podcast. Thank you for all the work you're doing, educating all of us, mere mortals on the other side of the fence, trying to do our day jobs and keep up with the trends, which can seem an impossible task, but you very much help it, and highly recommend people check out your Substack, follow you on LinkedIn, as a great way to keep up with the news. So with that in mind, Naveen, before I let you go, where do you want to send people that want to follow what you're doing online?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity and the kind words. And I just want to really quickly thank you for the work you're doing, honestly, Adam, and all of your listeners. my job is, it's hard and it's easy. Like, you're building shit that's really hard. And it's like, and you're, in this kind of denominator ocean of AI now, like trying to figure out how to do your job and not have it done for you, or have it done for you but not get fired, right? Like, it's crazy. You're doing hard work. You're helping a lot of people. You guys are enabling neurosurgery that wasn't possible 2 years ago. Like, it's wild. You're doing the hard work. My job is to follow and track the story, and sort of show people that this is stuff that deserves your attention and support. And it wouldn't be possible without people doing the work. So back at you. Neurotechnology.substack.com is my blog, I should probably be saying, but it's a newsletter. It's a Substack. It's great. Follow us on LinkedIn. And yeah, I can kind of add some links into the post.
Yep.
Notes and everything. Thank you so much again for the opportunity. Looking forward to the next one.
Thanks for the kind words about Omniscient. Thanks for coming on the show. And yeah, I will put all of those links that you send me in the show notes. Thanks a lot, Naveen. Great to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the show. For more information on the podcast, individual show notes, and all the links about where you can find the show, please visit businessofneurotech.com. We look forward to seeing you on a future episode.